What's up, traders? Andrew O'Connell here with pristinecapital.net. Let's talk about this pullback we just experienced in the headline indices, and let's preview the CPI report. Let's start off with our box scores. S&P 500 finished down 0.4%. The NASDAQ, which has been red hot, finished down 1.13%. Our IWM small caps finished down 1.36%. Dow Jones basically unchanged at down 0.16%. Our ARK Innovation ETF, I was long some put options on this one. Closed those out today. It finished down 5.45%. Pretty much all of these indices closed towards the middle end of their day's range. Volatility was big, but not a huge blowout within the volatility space. And breadth was pretty weak. Small caps had 30% advancers, and overall we had 42.2% of volume. The trend model did flip from a +1 to a -1. What was really interesting about today's session in particular is the trend may or may not matter. We have a binary event occurring tomorrow, and it is the CPI print. Now, this is going to give us a read as to how inflation is progressing, if it's accelerating, if it's decelerating. And this is super important because the Federal Reserve has stated pretty clearly that their tightening of monetary policy, the pace at which they're going to move through that process, is going to be determined by what happens to commodity prices, energy prices, and inflation more specifically. Looking at our Finviz heat map, we had a big sell-off within the semiconductor sector. And we've noticed this over the past couple days. There have been different groups that have been getting hit one by one. Over the past couple days, we had Tesla that was down big, Nvidia, another down day, pretty close to 4% down. And really just this entire semiconductors group. We've only had a few leadership groups in the market, one of which is solar energy companies, another one is semiconductors. And a lot of that is due to this Inflation Reduction Act. And the Inflation Reduction Act was signed, and these names sold off. So that really, it's very telling. Honestly, I think beyond the scope of what we do in terms of just price action, market generated information, I think this is just a really perplexing time where we have essentially a Cold War going on with China. We've got these issues with Russia and Ukraine, and it's essentially a resource war. I think really as a result of the pandemic, all these supply chains got shaken up. Everyone realized, hey, there's a finite number of resources. There are these supply chain bottlenecks. And now we're at a point where everyone's just kind of looking out for themselves. And so, that's being reflected in a lot of these commodity prices, a lot of the legislation that's being passed. The United States wants to become more independent in terms of semiconductors, energy, independence, etc. We did have a sell-off across all of the leading sectors today. Biotech was down big. Fintech, which has had a very nice run, down over 5%. And our blockchain assets were also down 2.75%. We did have some bright spots though. The solar space actually did manage to finish out positive. Energy was up over 3% at one point intraday. A lot of these energy names, they actually sold off into the bell. So the energy space, which had been so strong for maybe the first 6 months of the year, now it really looks like all the pops are being sold into. Style factors, we have the momentum and high div low vol style factors finish in the green. But we did have a pretty big sell-off within high beta, so that is pretty risk-off. And do I really blame anyone for trying to sell off some exposure ahead of a binary data point? Not really. And that's why we reduced some exposure over the past couple days. And to be honest, it just seems like there was so much easy money at the beginning of the summer to be made. It was oh my gosh, everyone's bearish. We could have this inflation deceleration. All the positioning is no one's in the market anymore. And the seasonality is fantastic. Now it just seems like we're in a more difficult environment where I think the market's basically saying hey, you got to prove it now. We're 12% off the lows, but we really need to see some big improvements if we want to go higher. So I think a lot is riding on tomorrow's inflation print. S&P 500, we're trading up just a smidge in the after hours. But today, noteworthy, we did close below the 5-day EMA. And now we pretty much have a pullback to the 10-day EMA, and our 20-day simple moving average, it is starting to catch up to price. But keep in mind, let's just say things go south tomorrow and market participants, they see the inflation numbers and they go, man, this isn't enough. Fed's going to have to do a little bit more. there's a lot of airspace between the 20-day simple moving average as well as this monthly value area high. This is really what I'm seeing as like the risk tomorrow. Maybe this comes out bad and we get this move down. Conversely, I do think if the inflation data point comes out light, and there's reasons to believe that it will, I mean, energy prices have come down considerably, that's really the bull case scenario. And to be honest, I think the bull case is really like a trip back up to 4,200 on the S&P 500. So for me, this is like a 50-50 coin flip at best. And for that reason, that's why I did, reduce some exposure. Now I'm in pretty close to 50% cash heading into tomorrow's session. I feel just so much more comfortable that way rather than trying to make some sort of big prediction as to what the CPI is going to do. We did pull back to this weekly value or the weekly point of control, and we did find support there. So there are still buyers that are buying the dips, but we are stuck inside of value for the week, and really as we should be. We have a big binary data point. Why would we be breaking out or breaking down? So we're gonna have to see what happens tomorrow. Let's take a look at the NASDAQ. NASDAQ was particularly weak today. And yeah, we're getting pretty close to that 20-day simple moving average. So is it out of the realm of possibility to test it? No, certainly not. That would be pretty par for the course, actually. That happens very frequently. So for me, it's been very important over the past week or two. Just make sure I'm not getting over the tips of my skis, because we really, there's so many wild cards that could be hitting the market. And then Russell 2000, this one had its first red candle in quite a while. The Russell 2000, these small caps have just been on a fantastic run. And, we saw the first signs of some selling pressure. And then, of course, the Dow Jones, this one actually didn't do so bad on a relative basis. And it's really because a lot of the growth stocks got hit today, and a lot of the value stocks, which are primarily in the Dow Jones, did just fine. So the Dow Jones just kind of humming along sideways. Let's take a look. Let's pull up some of my trades for today. And I tried to just do some light repositioning, nothing too crazy. So let's take a look. We're going to go to this common stock trade later because I did that in the after hours. So let's go over to options trades. I took a long entry in WWE. This is a name that we've been watching pretty closely. We've been talking about this internally within the Pristine Capital Trading Group. And the relative strength on this name is very high. The price action's acting very well. And there's a catalyst that we've been discussing. There's a new entrant to the WWE. His name is Logan Paul, huge guy. We've discussed this at length. But yeah, take a look at what WWE is doing today, or what it did today, excuse me. Check this out. So what was good is that because I was a little bit more lightly positioned heading into the session, I wasn't oh my gosh, now I need to think about my downside today. And I was able to look and kind of be offensive. But WWE, the stock's really just consolidating and moving sideways as the market gets a bit more choppy. And this thing is actually moving to the upside. So we had this gap higher, we never even filled the gap. And these candles, it just looks like there's some accumulation going on here within this name. And this one, if you look at the weekly chart as well, you can see we made some highs around $100. This was, what year was this? Yeah, this was in 2018. The stock was at about $100. We have a virgin point of control up here at around 73 and change. And I think this stock could end up making it back to those all-time highs. So I put something on not in common stock, in options. And the reason why I did that specifically was because I don't want to have to worry about stopping out of the trade. Let's say tomorrow, super volatile, the CPI goes poorly, whatever. I don't want to stop out and then have to re-enter it and whatever. This is an exposure that I want to have on really till the end of the year. And so, yeah, entered those options that expire in January. And then what else did we do? I actually took off my ARK Innovation put options. So I was long calls on ARK for a couple months there. I closed out my calls for a nice winner, and then I flipped into some puts and closed those out for a little base hit winner. So I closed out half for $345. I had paid $298, and I closed out the other half for $340. I had paid $298. So yeah, heading into CPI, I don't want to be too overexposed long or short. And then finally, I entered some DQ October calls at the 70 strike for $6.70. I've been trying this name a couple times, and I got a small winner in it once, got a small loser in the other time. But this is a name where I think when these Chinese stocks bounce, this name could really make a sharp move very quickly. Like, look at what's going on. KWEB has just been a nightmare, the Chinese stocks. This one is just hanging on by a thread, it seems. And look, we closed above the 20-day simple moving average and the 50-day as well. And yeah, just a green finish while the market was pretty red. So this is one where, again, I don't want to be stopping in and out of the trade. So I was like, you know what, I'll just use a small options position and get this exposure on the books. And then the other trade that I did, I closed out my Coinbase common shares in the after hours. This trade was like, had all the makings of like a grand slam. We put this on, this was a breaking news trade that we put on at like 8 a.m. It was on August 4th. And I bought the stock at around like $79. Took off 50% of it pretty close to the top of this candle at about 110 bucks. And then I took the other half into earnings, and this company, it didn't really have a good earnings report. This company's like definitely very impaired. It's trading at like 83 bucks in the after hours. So I took off the other half for basically like a single. So this one, sometimes that's going to happen. Like, you hold on for that bigger move. Hey, maybe something magical is going to happen here. And that's sort of the risk you take. Sometimes, let's say you got like a triple, or like, who knows, maybe this could be like a, grand slam. And then sometimes that triple turns into like a single. And that's kind of what happened here. So I closed at the remaining 50% for $84.01. I had paid $79.76. So not too bad. It's basically just, let's turn over the edge. May have overstayed my welcome a little bit here. Who knows? It's not really like, it was a breaking news trade. So it's not like a trade that I want to get married to. But yeah, so heading into tomorrow, did some trading today, did some adjustments. In about half cash, half exposed. I do have some SPY put options as well. So if something goes to the downside, it's not like I'm going to get crushed or killed or anything like that. So yeah, I just want to be very open-minded and be fluid. I think too many times, like, we try to make a prediction or whatever, I see so much discussion around what the CPI is going to bring. To be honest, I think it's more so just about getting in a position where you feel comfortable no matter what happens, and then just letting those chips fall. So with that said, that does it for this recap video. Hope you all have an awesome evening, and I'm super excited to check back in with you tomorrow night.